Good evening tonight from Havana, Cuba, where history has just been made. President Obama touching down, Air Force One landing here in Havana, an image unimaginable not long ago. The first president to visit Cuba since Calvin Coolidge in 1928. And while here, we will have the exclusive interview with President Obama. The president's visit does not come without controversy, without risk. He will meet privately with President Raul Castro, and he will speak directly to the Cuban people first in a televised speech. The first family is here, the First Lady and their daughters, and the Cuban people are welcoming them with open arms. As many here now ask, and as many Americans wonder back home, how far will the president go with what he says here about a communist government, about human rights, and about the freedoms of ordinary Cubans? President Obama landing here in Cuba late today, making history. Just 90 miles from the U.S., he is the first president to visit Cuba in 88 years. It comes a little more than a year after the president announced the U.S. would begin normalizing relations with Cuba, a thaw decades after the Cold War ended. When we sat down with the president the first time, we asked him if this day was coming. Will you visit Cuba in your final 2 years as president?
You know, I don't have any current plans to visit Cuba.
Not ruling it out?
Well, let's see how things evolve.
After that first interview, we brought you to Cuba, driving to find the former U.S. embassy here, stripped of its title and shut down after Fidel Castro took power. At the time, Cubans aware of the growing tensions, lining up before the embassy could close to apply for American visas. The wait list, months long. But outside the old embassy this past year, we witnessed the first signs of the thaw. You can see the heavy security behind me, the officers on the corner here. We were here as members of the U.S. delegation arrived a short time ago because there is great hope that this will soon become the U.S. embassy again. And tonight, the embassy is now open again. And on his first night here, it will be among President Obama's first stops. 11 million people live here in Cuba, on average making just $20 a month. By some estimates, just 5% have internet access in their homes. And tonight, the people here are waiting for the American president. Here in the heart of historic old Havana, you talk to the young families here, and you hear the same thing over and over again. It's time. I ask Yvette, she's 24, what she thinks of the president's visit.
¿Qué piensas acerca de la visita del presidente americano?
She tells us we don't know exactly what will happen here, but I hope there is something good and families can be reunited. And there was this young father, Andy, and his family. He tells us it's good that Cuba and the U.S. can now get along, and he reveals he has family he would love to visit in Louisiana. The president will make an historic speech televised to the Cuban people, and inside this merceria, a tiny store, I asked, will they be watching?
Por supuesto.
And what if the president offers tough words about change that must come here?
Si las palabras son difícil para su presidente, ¿qué piensas?
Of course, she tells us she'll be listening, and we are prepared for anything the president has to say. On the streets here, scenes frozen in time. The American cars from the 1950s.
The road to Havana paved with glory for rebel chieftain Fidel Castro.
When Fidel Castro took power in 1959, he shut down imports of American cars. 60,000 vintage cars still driven here. The cars, a symbol of an economy in slow motion for decades, still controlled by a communist government. And there are still arrests here, dissidents who speak out about their own government. President Obama aware of criticism from some back home that the embargo should not be lifted, and we will ask him about that while here. But already, more Americans are now visiting Cuba for cultural exchanges. Simply coming for tourism is not yet allowed. Flights from America will soon resume. There is a bidding war among airlines already. And tonight, Starwood Hotels and Resorts just announcing they will renovate and operate 3 hotels here.
The Monte Carlo of the Americas.
More than half a century ago, Cuba was a tourist mecca for Americans, the nightclubs, the gambling. But now, it's President Obama's gamble. Will restoring relations and pushing for a more open economy actually give Cubans a new voice? As many Americans back home wait to visit as tourists again, to see the culture frozen in time in those American cars, we asked, with no American parts allowed in for decades, who fixes them and how? Mechanics who improvise. A 53 Plymouth.
Mercedes-Benz.
In that car, now a Mercedes engine. And we wondered how much of the car is original.
¿Cuántas partes en este coche son original?
He answers with a smile, just the body and the transmission. Rebuilding it all on their own. As an American president now arrives, many ask what will change here and how far will he go in private with President Castro, and in public before the Cuban people. The president has already acknowledged that the embargo will likely not be lifted here in Cuba until the next president. And we'll ask him about some of the criticism back home that embargo shouldn't be lifted at all. Our exclusive interview with the president tomorrow night, right here on World News Tonight, with our first moments with the president on Good Morning America first thing in the morning, as ABC News coverage of this historic visit gets underway.